Welcome everyone. Good morning. Monday again. These weeks are flying by, absolutely flying by. Morning. Oh no. Best thing about having a lurgy on a Monday, I can watch this live. Well, I hope you don't feel too bad. Oh, bless. Yeah, I obviously don't recommend that to to be able to tune in, get yourself ill. Cool. Well, welcome. Thank you for tuning in, and yeah, I hope you don't feel too bad. So today, all about these. This is one of the coolest specimens I've got. This is a real foot. So we're going to have a look at all the bones and the joints of the foot today, and then add the layers on again. So yeah, hopefully, well, it's nice actually to come back to something that's fairly easy, considering we've just been doing loads of nerves and blood supply of the hand, and then cranial nerves as well, and it's a bit like a bit mind blowing. So yeah, nice to do just some good old fashioned bones of the foot today. Morning, Julie. Good to see you, and Neil as well. Welcome back to you guys. Some regulars in. That's good to see. So if anybody's got any questions as we go through, then just give us a shout. But yeah, we're going to go through the foot and the ankle, and then start layering on each of the all of the tissues. So starting off with the bones and the joints today, and it can be quite a confusing area. It's very similar to the hand, but I don't know. It just seems a bit easier to revise and easier to get your head around than the hand and the wrist. I don't know why. Maybe that's just me. But let's get you going. Let's have a look at this first of all. Just get rid of that. There we go. So move me over there. Okay, so we're going to have a look at all of these regions. Hey, good. So we've got a few people that have been able to join us today, so that's good. Yeah, well, welcome for the live one. Really good. So, if you're brand new to any of the foot anatomy, ankle anatomy, then today's a perfect day. So, and if you've done stuff before, then please you just take it as a bit of a refresher for might be a bit of a refresher for some of you, but it's good to go over some of the key points, because especially if you work in a clinic, and we've had a few ankle injuries over the last couple of weeks actually, and so knowing the anatomy and where things go from and to, and especially the bits we're going to have a look at today, really common areas to get injured are the ankles, especially if you deal with people who play sports, or if you work in a gym, if you're in the fitness industry. So we're going to have a look at, just get my arrow there. These key things. So your tibia bone, which is your main shin bone, and we'll have a look at all of these in a second on the videos. Your fibula, which is the bone on the outside of your leg, and just as an aside, in anatomy, the leg is from the knee to the ankle. Okay, so that kind of shin bit is the leg, and then from the knee upwards to the hip is the thigh. So if you hear anatomists talking about the leg, then they mean the lower leg. Okay, so the shin part. So tibia and fibula obviously form the leg. And then we have 7 tarsal bones. So similar to the carpals in the wrist, which we've been looking at over the last few weeks, we've also got some tarsals in the foot, and we'll be having a look at some of those in a bit more detail. You've got metatarsals. So like you have in the hand, you've got metacarpals. In the foot, we've got these ones, which are metatarsals. And if you never really did looked at anatomy stuff before, then you've probably heard of metatarsals with football injury. So footballers injuring these bones, especially if they get stood on, you can fracture the metatarsal bones. And then phalanges are the same as the hands. So the phalanges in the hands are the fingers, and in the foot they are the toes. Okay, so these bones right at the end here, and they're very similar setup. So the big toe has 2 phalanges, and then all the rest have 3. The same with the thumb. So thumb has 2 and all the rest have 3, and your toe is exactly the same. Okay, so we're going to have a look at that as well. Okay, so that's the kind of whole region, and we're going to be focusing on especially the kind of hinge joint, which is the main part of the ankle joint. We're going to have a look at that first. So let's just have a look at this tibia in a bit more detail. So your tibia bone, the main shaft of the tibia, we'll see a picture of it in a second. It's the larger of the 2 bones in your leg. Okay, so it's the one that you can feel on the front, the kind of shin bone at the front, second largest bone in the body, so it's a pretty big bone, and it flares outwards at both ends. So it comes out at the top towards the knee, and it forms like a platform for the femur to sit on, and we'll have a look at that when we get to the knee. And then at the bottom, it also flares out, but only on one side. And they then form these bits, which people call their ankle bones, which are those bits there. And those sticky out bits are called malleoli. And you have a medial malleolus and a lateral malleolus, and then together they're called malleoli. So the medial malleolus is your tibia. Okay, so the one, so the tibia bone here comes down, and then it curves outwards and then forms that lump on the inside there. And then your fibula comes down the outside and forms that one there. Okay, and again, we'll have a look at those in a second. So at this ankle joint, so this high ankle joint here, you have a, if you remember from kind of, I don't know whether you did carpentry at school, the old DT lessons, you had a mortise and tenon joint, and that's basically what the ankle is. So we've got a kind of archway which is formed by the tibia and fibula, and then a bone that slots in between the two. Okay, so we'll have a look at those as we go. And the bone that slots into that area there, so distally, so furthest away from the midline of your body, that's what distally means, with the fibula and the talus bone. Okay, so and it's the talus bone that slots in between that fibula and tibia. Okay, the anterior border runs from the tibial tuberosity, which you should be able to feel. So if you feel your kneecaps, slide your hands down the front of your shin, and then you should be able to feel a big bony lump just underneath your kneecap, and that's called the tibial tuberosity. Okay, and that is the top part. So if I just point it out on this one, so just under there, that's the top part of your the shaft of your tibia. Okay, so the anterior part of the tibia. And then the distal end furthest away, which we just talked about, forms the medial malleolus, which is just there. Okay, so that is your tibia. And then your fibula, just move me out of the way there. It's a bit of a weird one, this, because the fibula looks as if it's just stuck on the end of the, or on the side of the leg. But it has a big role to play in the stability of the ankle joint. It does actually move. So if we have a look at that end there and that end there, so they both seesaw, okay, and they'll glide along each other. So the top part, so this bit up here, you can actually assess that, and you can give it a wiggle, and you can see whether it's restricted or not. And restrictions in the fibula can actually impede some of the ankle movements, because as you come up into dorsiflexion, your fibula moves, okay, and it creates space for your ankle to be able to dorsiflex, which is bringing your toes towards your shin. And if there's a restriction in that movement, then it will look as if your dorsiflexion is poor, and it may be something to look for if you do treatments. Okay, so having a look at that fibula bone and whether the fibula is gliding as it should be, like a seesaw. Yeah, and the other thing for the fibula, gives origin to muscles. So there's a couple of really big muscles that attach. Well, there's a few big muscles that attach onto there, and the bit in between the two bones as well, which we're going to have a look at in a sec. And it acts as a pulley. So where the muscles are along here, and then the tendons run all the way along here and then around the back of the ankle, and that creates like a pulley system for you to be able to generate force with those muscles. Okay, and they can often become injured with lateral ankle sprains. So if you have an injury to the ankle here, if you've rolled your ankle and it's come out like an egg, and you've damaged some of the ligaments, then the muscles along the side here may have to do some extra work because of those ligaments not working very well. And then, yep, it acts as a lateral splint for the ankle joint, and you'll see that in a second when we have a look at the videos. So let's have a look at those. Here we go. Just get rid of that one and that one. Okay, cool. So this is your tib and fib. So there's your tibia. And when we had a look at the image before of the picture with the person's shin, said it came all the way down and then out to the side, and then that's what forms your medial malleolus. So this is your inside ankle bone. So if you have a feel of your inside ankle bone, that's basically what it is. Okay, so it's that bit of your tibia just there. And then the outside ankle bone, so if you slide your hand all the way down the outside and feel the knobbly bit at the bottom, that's your fibula. Okay, so right at the bottom there, which is your kind of ankle bone, that prominence is your fibula. And then the two are joined. So there's a join in between here. So you've got a tibiofibular joint, and there's a ligament that goes across the two at the front. And there's also one that goes around the back as well. And that ligament helps to keep the bones together. Okay. This can be a bit of a problem for some people because especially football injuries. So if you're wearing studded shoes, you land in a surface where your studs get stuck, and then you go to twist and turn away, but your foot stays still. Okay, so if you imagine that tibia and fibula coming down with the foot underneath, and then the foot stays still, and then your tibia does that, and that opens up that joint just there, and you get what's called a syndesmosis injury. Okay, so just in that area there. Something it's quite a nasty one. It's a high ankle sprain basically. So let's have a look at that in a bit more detail. So you're going to add some layers on. So this is one of the first interesting bits. So this bit of connective tissue here, this is called an interosseous membrane. So interosseous means in between the bones, and as you can see, it's in between your tibia and your fibula. Okay, and this bit of connective tissue is super tough. So if you break your leg, anything happens to your leg, your bones will break before that tissue. That tissue is super strong. And what it does, and this is really useful for later when we're looking at the compartments of the lower leg. It creates a divide between the front and the back of the leg. So again, if you've heard of something called compartment syndrome, as we go through this will make a bit more sense, because this is the anatomy that creates compartment syndrome, because it creates that compartment. So if you have a bleed in a particular area in the lower leg, and the blood can't get through the leg because of this interosseous membrane, so it starts to build and create a load of pressure on either the front or the back of the leg, and it can be really well, it's a medical emergency, that one. It needs to be dealt with really quickly, otherwise you'll have lots of damage to the nerves, and you can bleed out as well around that area. So we'll add those kind of things in as we go, but it's useful to know, just to stick in your mind for when we get into the connective tissue and ligament area of the foot as well. So that's it, interosseous membrane, and there's your tibia, and there's your fibula. Okay, so let's just play the rest of that one. So there you go. That's how to spell it. So in between the bones, interosseous. And it's proper solid that is. So we've got a joint at the top, and then here's the joint at the bottom. So this is the distal, because it's furthest away from the body, tibiofibular joint, because it joins the tibia to the fibula. And you'll see in a second they give it a bit of a wiggle, and it moves a bit. There you go. Okay, so you do get a little bit of movement there. So there's your malleolus. So medial and lateral. So we were having a feel of those before. So medial is part of the tibia, and that's on the inside of your ankle. Lateral is on the outside of the ankle. Okay, so if you run your hand all the way down the outside, that's that bone at the bottom. That's what you're feeling just there. Cool. Okay, let's have a look at this bit. In fact, we'll go back to this. Let me introduce you to these first. Cool. So that's the end bit of the tibia and fibula, and the bit that joins into the one of the first bones of the ankle and the foot. Okay, so that's a bit of a recap of what we've done. Let's go on to the next bit. Here we go. Okay, right. There's loads of stuff on here. Okay, this is one of those ones where we're going to break it down into bits. Okay, and it looks like a lot at the moment, and it is a lot, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the foot. But this is one of those where it's a good idea to take a screenshot once you've kind of watched the video through, pause it, take a screenshot, and then this is a really nice way of doing your revision for your foot. Okay, so we're going to be focusing first of all just on this bit. Okay, so don't worry about the rest for now. We're just going to be focused on this bit. So this bone here is called your talus. Okay, so that's that bit there. And that talus bone, we've already mentioned before, that's the bit that slots up into the tibia and fibula. Okay, and it creates that pivot for what we call dorsiflexion and plantarflexion, which is basically the foot moving up and down. So bringing your toes towards your shin is dorsiflexion, pointing your toes away is plantarflexion. Okay, and that's the bone, and linking with the bones above, tibia and fibula, that is responsible for that movement. That's where it comes from. Okay, another couple of ones that I just want to point out is this one here, your calcaneus, and this is your heel bone. Okay, so the calcaneus is the heel bone, and we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail. And then you've got this long bone along here, which is the navicular, and then this cube-shaped bone, which is called the cuboid. Okay, so we're going to have a look at just this region in a bit more detail. Let's just flick back to that one. Okay, just get that one up there. Right then, here we go. So just give you a bit of an orientation after having a look at that picture. So this is your medial malleolus, which is part of your tibia. Okay, this bone underneath here, that is your talus bone, and it's the talus that articulates, it joins with the tibia and the fibula. We'll have a look at that in a second again. That big chunky bone there, that's your calcaneus bone. Okay, so that's your heel bone. And then that one there, that one's called your navicular, just on this side here. Okay, so that just give you a bit of an orientation, and then we'll go through the rest in a sec. Here we go. So there's your talus, calcaneus, and then navicular just there. So what we're going to do is start taking away some of the bones and just be left with the talus. Okay, so this is the shape of the talus. I'll just pause that there a second, and you can see that they've marked it out on here on the bone, where there are really smooth bits of bone, and then bits that are a bit bumpy. Okay, and it's the smooth bits that articulate with the other bones around the area. Okay, so this talus bone has got a join with the bones above, also with the bone below, the calcaneus, and also the bones in front, the navicular and mainly the navicular. Mainly the navicular. So the calcaneus will then attach onto the cuboid as well. So we've got 3 areas where this talus bone will attach onto other bones. So one at the top, one on the front, and one underneath. So this talus bone kind of sits floating in between all of these other bones around it. And there are no muscle attachments onto this bone. So there's no way that you can influence the bone movement with a muscle. It responds to the movements of the muscles all around it. Okay, so it's quite a fascinating bone, this one, if you get into it. So there's another smooth surface there. Okay, so that's another place where you're going to get an articulation, a join, and then there's another one there. So this surface connects onto your calcaneus, onto your heel bone. This one along the top, that connects onto your tibia and fibula. So you can see how nice and smooth that is there. And there we go, that's it in place. So there's the first bit of your ankle joint. Okay, let me just take that back a little bit. I'm just going to wait until that spins. There we go, just pause that there. Okay, cool. So here's your talus bone. That smooth surface there joins with the tibia, which is this bone here, and the fibula, which is that one there. Okay, and you remember I was saying about that mortise and tenon lock? Yeah, that joint. So it's really deep in that joint. And there is no way, well, you'll see in a second with all the ligaments on there, that this bone can do any other movements unless there's an injury. Okay, so what happens with the talus, it literally does that and that. Okay, so dorsiflexion, plantarflexion, and that's it. If there's any sideways movements of it, so it kind of comes to the side there or there, it usually indicates that there's a problem with one of the ligaments around the ankle. Or if it slides forwards and backwards, it indicates that there's a problem. Okay. So it's a good question here. So if you injure your talus bone, will that result in restricted movement forever? It can do, yeah. It depends whether you have an operation on it. So if you land really heavily in dorsiflexion, or you have repeated landing in dorsiflexion, happens a lot with gymnastics, then what can happen is you'll get on the front of the talus. Move the whole thing, keep that there, just want to move that. On the front of the talus there, you'll get little bone spurs. And those bone spurs will basically block the movement. So you won't be able to dorsiflex as much as you should. But you can have surgery on that, and you can have the bone shaved so that then it creates the smooth surface again. So if it's left, then it will definitely affect your ankle movements. But there are some, depending on what's happened to it, there are some surgeries that you can have done which will help restore the function again. Okay, so that's a really good question. So this is it with a bit more soft tissue on. So we've got some ligaments on the inside and ligaments on the outside here, and you might have heard of some of these before. So, and there it is moving there. So let me just pause up there. So this is your tibia here. This is your fibula here. So that ligament there is the one that we saw before. So that's your tibiofibular ligament. So that joining the tib and fib together. Now this one here that you've just seen, that attaches from your fibula onto your talus, and it's at the front of the ankle. So it's called the anterior talofibular ligament, okay, or the ATFL for short. And you might have heard of the ATFL injuries before. That's the one where if you roll your ankle, so the heel bone comes in and you open up all the ligaments on the outside, that's the ligament that you will injure. And then that one at the back there, if I just pause that there. So there's your fibula, there's your tibia, that's your talus, and that is a ligament going from your talus to the fibula, and it's at the back. So this is your posterior talofibular ligament, or your PTFL. Okay? Less likely to get injured, this one, than the other one, the ATFL at the front, but still can be involved in some lateral ankle sprains. Depends on how bad the sprain is. So let's have a look at that. So there you can see it's getting tight as the foot goes into dorsiflexion. There's your PTFL, and there's your ATFL. Okay, so they're quite high up, and they go kind of straight across rather than in a diagonal. And then the deltoid ligament is all on the inside of the ankle. We'll have a look at that in a bit more detail. Less likely to injure that side. So if we have a look at the movement now, so these are the movements that those ligaments will prevent. Okay, so rocking from side to side and shearing forward and backwards. So if all of those ligaments are intact, those movements shouldn't happen. So you shouldn't get any gliding and you shouldn't get any tilting of the talus. It should all be nice and solid. If you've done clinical testing before, those are the clinical tests that we do. So we do an anterior to posterior shear test to test the integrity of the ATFL and PTFL. And we'll do a syndesmosis squeeze test, and we'll do a rotation test as well to see whether the tibia and the fibula actually open up as you twist the foot. Okay, so that's the reason why they do it. So why do they fuse the ankle, and is it the talus they are fusing? They can fuse the talus, yeah. They usually will do it with people where they're beyond rehab. And they maybe they didn't do very good rehab initially, or maybe they've had such a traumatic ankle injury that there's not really much else that they can do, and they will just pin and fuse those ankle bones. So you'll be limited in your plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, which can have some knock-on biomechanical effects, but the body is really good at adapting, and usually other areas of the body will start to take over those movements. It will never be perfect, and you may have to modify some of the activities that you can actually do, but that's some of the reasons why they would do it. If you've got chronic ankle instability, you've had an old ankle injury, you never rehabbed it, and it's constantly going again and again, spraining again and again. Well, once you've damaged the ligaments, if you've had a repair, then they can damage. But if you haven't had a repair, then the ankle's just loose. Okay, so the muscles will then take over the job. But if you're still really struggling, then they'll tend to fuse things together. Okay, so yeah, that it's usually worst case scenario, that kind of thing. That I don't know many that would want to do that as a first option. Cool. So that's your tibia, your fibula, and the talus, which is the first bone that forms the ankle joint with the leg. Okay, so that's those two. Right, let's have a look at some of the others. Right then, so where are we? So we've got the talus bone here, which we've just looked at, and then underneath that you have the calcaneus, which is your heel bone. You might have heard of something called the subtalar joint. So subtalar means underneath the talus. So that's what we're going to have a look at next. Let's have a look at that. So hopefully these videos will bring some of those pictures to life. Here we go. Okay, so just give you an orientation again. Medial malleolus. So this is your tibia, talus bone. There's your calcaneus. There's your navicular. Okay, just there, and that's where we'll stop. Okay, we'll add on the other bits in a second. I think this adds on a few more. We'll soon see. So calcaneus, navicular, and then as we come around the other side, you've got some other bones which we won't worry about just yet. You've got your cuneiform rows, and then there's your cuboid. So we have mentioned the cuboid before, and that attaches onto your calcaneus. So here's your heel bone. This is the calcaneus. And the Achilles attaches here. And then you usually get, if you get Achilles problems, usually around that area there. And then there's the talus sitting on the calcaneus. Let me just pop that back there. Okay, I'm just going to pause that there. Okay, so the bit to have a look at here. So this is your calcaneus bone. And then it's got this bit here, which is basically like a shelf projection coming in. and the reason why that is there, so in the show notes, I put about knowing your sustentaculum tali from your calcaneus. It's actually part of the same bone, and the sustentaculum tali, sustentaculum, easy for you. This is a good word for Scrabble. That means shelf. Okay, so sustentaculum is a shelf, and then tali for the talus bone. So this bit here is a shelf for the talus to sit on. Okay, and you'll see that in a sec. And that joint there is your subtalar joint because it's underneath the talus. You'll see it in a sec when it's on. Okay, so sustentaculum tali just there, and then there's your talus sitting on the shelf. So that bit there is sustentaculum tali, all of that. So you can see the smooth surfaces again. So that's where the talus will sit. The cuboid articulates on the front just there. Talus all along there. Okay, so this is all the subtalar joint just there. Just move me over there out of the way. So there's the talus, and it basically just slots into that joint there. Okay, now if I just take that back a second. Right, just pause that there. So if we remember what we've just looked at, so we had the tibia and fibula on the top. So that would be on top of here, okay? And the tibia and fibula do that, okay? So they do plantar flexion, dorsiflexion with the talus, yeah? And then if the movement then underneath that comes from the subtalar joint, so this bit here, is that. So it's when your foot inverts and everts. Okay, so if you've heard of pronation supination, it's a little bit different. Pronation supination is a combination of other movements, but from the subtalar joint, you'll basically get if the heel bone goes in, right, then you get into a bit more of a high arch position, and then as it goes out and it flattens, that movement in when the heel bone goes in, that's inversion. And when the heel bone comes out, that's eversion. And those movements occur at the subtalar joint. Okay, so that's where they happen. So we've got dorsiflexion, plantarflexion coming from the talus and the fibula and the tibia. And then, so that's the top part of the talus. And then underneath the talus, you've got the subtalar joint, which is where inversion and eversion come from. Okay, so this is where your heel bone can roll in and then heel bone can roll out. And one that always sticks with people, I'll just pop that on there, just move that out of the way. Okay, so if you have a look at the foot here, so if I just move the calcaneus, then the whole foot moves. Okay, so just moving the calcaneus from side to side. So as I bring the calcaneus inwards like that, so calc comes in, the whole foot goes really rigid and stiff, okay, and into what we call a supinated position. Okay, so there's supination, like I said, is a combination of things that are happening with the foot. We'll talk about that later. But if you invert the calcaneus, so the calcaneus goes in, it stiffens the foot. When the calcaneus comes out and you evert it, so it goes to the outside of the body, the foot goes floppy and it's pronated. Okay, so and you'll never forget this. So basically, when it's in, it's stiff, and when it's out, it's floppy. There you go. So you won't forget that now. Right. Let's have a look at this again. Here we go. Okay, so there's your calcaneus again. Cuboid attaching at the front. We'll have a look at that in a bit more detail in a second. Talus sitting on the top. I know, yeah. I have to not look at the camera when I teach that. Okay, so there's your subtalar joint just there. I knew that it's always that gets the most comments on these. Okay, so what have we got? So that, yeah, so there's your navicular bone, and that's where the talus will sit, just in there, and sustentaculum tali there. So there's navicular, and then joining from there to there is a ligament, and we'll have a look at that in a second. But this whole complex is called the talocalcaneal calcaneonavicular joint. Okay, so all of that area there. So as the heel bone goes out, okay, and the foot starts to collapse in, as it, well, not collapse, but it rolls in into pronation, all of that area, because the foot then goes floppy, is able to flatten and mold to the ground. Okay, so that heel bone moving out, so that on that subtalar joint, that's really crucial for you to be able to pronate, and mold to the ground, and then you resupinate before you push off. Okay, so that movement underneath is so in this subtalar area, that inversion eversion, really, really important. Okay, right, let's have a look at this one. Okay, so going to go back to that PowerPoint again. So we've had a look at the talus, had a look at calcaneus, we've looked at the cuboid just really briefly, and we've seen the navicular bone as well. So if we think about where this is, so there's your big toe. So the navicular is on the inside. Okay, so that's always on the medial aspect, and then the cuboid is on the lateral aspect, and it's near your little toe here. Now your little toe is quite unique, and you'll see this in a second on the video, but on the base of your fifth metatarsal, so these are all numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the base of your little toe, there is a sticky out projection, and there's a specific muscle that attaches onto there that we'll have a look at in a sec, but that it articulates with the cuboid bone. Okay, just on the side there. Okay, so let's have a look at those. So we want that one, get rid of that one, and that one. Okay, here we are. So this flies through all of them. No problem, no probs. Have a good day. So let's just pause that a sec. Right then, so reorientation again, just really quickly, because this video is quite quick, this one. So medial malleolus just there, calcaneus bone, talus, navicular. Okay, so that's where we've got to so far. Then the next bone down from the navicular, there are 3 of them. And there are 3 cuneiform bones, or cuneiform bones, whatever you want to call them. They basically look like the old stone tablets that people used to write scripture on. Okay, that's why they're called cuneiforms or cuneiforms. So there's 3 of those, and sometimes they're called 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes they're called medial, middle, and then lateral. And so this one here, because that's the medial malleolus, that will be the medial cuneiform bone. Okay, so let's have a look at these. So there's your calcaneus and your talus, navicular, and then these are now your cuneiform bones. So there's that one there, so that's your medial. That one there is in the middle, and then that one there is lateral. Okay, and they articulate, they join with the navicular and the cuboid, okay, around that area there. Okay, so let's have a look at those. There we go. So you can see cuboid join there, and then all along the navicular there. There's that sticky out bit on the 5th. So there's your calcaneus, cuboid just there, cuneiform bones just underneath, just there, and then all the way back round to the navicular just there, and then the talus there. Okay, so it's a bit of a sort of spin around the foot from the top and the bottom, that one. Cool, and then we have a look at the metatarsals. So these are all numbered. So like I said, from 1 through to 5. So 1 is your big toe, and your big toe, if you remember the thumb from doing the wrist and hand a couple of weeks ago, the thumb was called the pollux, P-O-L-L-U-X. The big toe is called the hallux, H-A-L-L-U-X. Okay, so this one here is your hallux, and then so these bones here are your metatarsals. So similar to the metacarpals in your hand, there, and then there, and there. And if you have a look, number one, so your big toe metatarsal is really thick and it's really chunky. And if you have a look on my model as well, really, really thick compared to the others. Yeah, these ones are quite thin. So there's a lot of load that goes through that big toe. Okay, and so the big toe is developed to be able to take that load. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So little toe is 5, and then you've got this projection on the base of the 5th. There it is. And when we do the muscles, there's a key muscle that attaches into there. So the metatarsals are curved. Okay, so they're curved forward, but all of the heads are flat. Okay, so as it comes down, the heads are flat, but then the bases are curved, and you can see where it attaches here. So there's your cuboid, cuneiforms, and they're all curved. Okay, so the bit that's proximal is curved, and the distal part is all flat. You've got joins in between your tarsals and your metatarsals, and there's very little movement in those joints there, and it's arched, okay, like we've just seen. But it's also arched front to back as well. Okay, so we've got an archway in the middle and then an archway forward to back too, which is really important, again, as we start adding the layers on, because that generates something called the windlass mechanism, which is something how we propel ourselves as we're walking. Okay, and then the very last thing to have a look at is, just pop those there, which are your toes. So let's have a look at those. So these are your phalanges. So that's your hallux. It's only got 2. Remember we said that, so same as the thumb. And then all the others have got 3. So you've got a proximal, a middle, and a distal phalanx. And then these joints here are your metatarsal phalangeal joints, or MTP joints, all of those ones there. These ones in between the phalanges are your IP joints, interphalangeal, so in between the phalanges. Okay, so that is a whistle-stop tour of the bones and the joints of the foot. What we will start to do as we go through, I'll just make sure that I've covered everything from here. Yeah, we've done everything. So we've done the cuneiform rows, done the cuboid, base of the 5th, metatarsals here, and they're numbered from number 1 there all the way through to number 5. Then you've got your phalanges, only 2 in the big toe, and then 3 in all the others. Okay, so that is all the bones and the joints of the foot. Let's just have a look. Yeah, so in terms of joints wise, now you know the names of the bones. It should be quite easy to work out where the joints are. Okay, so like here we've got the inferior tibiofibular joint, so it joins from the tibia to the fibula. We had a look at that one, which had that ligament on before it joins onto the talus. The talocrural joint is the name specifically given to where the talus inserts onto the tibia and the fibula. Okay, so that plantar flexion, dorsiflexion joint that we've been talking about, that's your talocrural joint, and only dorsiflexion, plantar flexion comes from there. Then we have the subtalar joint, so it's underneath the talus, and that's where your inversion and eversion comes from, okay, which is part of pronation and supination. Then you've got mid-tarsals, so in between all of the tarsal bones, your navicular, your cuboid, and your cuneiform rows. Tarsometatarsal joints between your tarsals, so the cuboid, navicular, and cuneiforms, and your metatarsals. Okay, so the big long bones that we were looking at just a second ago. Metatarsophalangeal towards the end of the foot, so where the metatarsals join into the toes, and then interphalangeal in between your toes. Okay, so that's all of the joints of the foot. And again, if you kind of look at those at the beginning, you're like, what the heck does all that mean? But if you know the bones, then you can start to work out what the joints are. Yeah, we've covered those. Just make sure I've covered everything for this week. Metatarsal phalangeal, yeah, so there's your metatarsal. Oh no, that's wrong actually. That should be down here. Okay, don't screenshot this one. So there's your metatarsal and there's your phalange. So that should be there, your metatarsal phalangeal joint. So that arrow should be there. Okay. Intertarsal, in between your tarsals, and then mid-tarsal up around the talus area. Okay, so again, hopefully it all makes sense. Talocrural, so that was the join between the talus and the tibia and the fibula. Okay, and that's that plantar flexion, dorsiflexion joint just there. Perfect. I think, yeah, that's it. Cool. Good. So, bones and joints of the ankle and foot done. We'll do a recap next week. We'll see, just layer this on week after week. And next week, what we'll start to do is add on the ligaments and the connective tissue. So we've already had a look at the interosseous membrane, and we've already had a look at some of the ligaments as well. But we'll have a look at those in a bit more detail next week, and then we'll start adding on some of the muscles too. Okay, cool. Good to see you again live, Becky. Slowly catching up. Yeah, no problem at all. They'll be there forever. So yeah, take your time. And whoever was ill, I hope you're all right. And we'll see you next week.